Hi guys, it's Dr. Scott. I'm back here having a dad chat, my first in a little while. Now I must apologize. This is the first dad chat that I've had for about 5 weeks as I have been working my way through the trials and tribulations of daddy daycare. As a result, my stress levels and my attention to Hamish have been absolutely paramount and very laser focused. But secondly, what it has done is it has created a time management challenge for me with regards to when I get a chance to shoot some videos. Today, I've got some time, so here we are, a dad chat. We're going to discuss my major learnings from the first 7 months of being a parent. So my first learning that I've had over the first 7 months of being a parent has been a greater level of appreciation, a greater level of amazement of what the human body can achieve when given the opportunity. Having been given that chance to be able to watch my wife go through pregnancy, go through labor, and ultimately go through the birth of Hamish was nothing more than simply humbling. My wife had an amazing labor. We were very fortunate to have an amazing private midwife and support crew that let us have a water birth at home. With that, Mel simply took care of business. She wasn't touched or even massaged through any of the labor and the childbirth. She had no complications, she had no tearings, and at the result, we had a perfect birth after a 5-hour labor at home, giving birth to a healthy 8-pound baby boy. So to be able to sit back as a chiropractor, somebody who works with the body and appreciates what it can achieve when no interference is there, to be able to watch it in a slightly different setting with regards to pregnancy, labor, and childbirth was simply an amazing experience. The second major learning that I've had over the past 7 months has been simply to quote, I believe it was Mike Tyson, "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face." My wife and I, as I just mentioned, had an amazing pregnancy, labor, and childbirth, and then on day 3, we got punched in the face. We had obviously the intention for my wife to be able to breastfeed. The first couple of days, Hamish had attached perfectly. His suck was excellent. He was getting colostrum, and that seemed to be it. Unfortunately, it appears that my wife simply does not have the glandular tissue in her breasts to produce breast milk. So we had to come up with a plan very, very quickly. Our private midwife, Vanessa, bless her cotton socks, was straight onto it, and she hooked us up with the amazing community of people that are out there that are willing to donate their own breast milk. I must give credit to Facebook, heaven forbid, I never thought I'd say those words, to the ability for my wife and ourselves to be able to connect with these people to allow us to be able to give Hamish nothing but 100% breast milk for the first 6 months of his life. I have simply learnt different suburbs in Perth. I have driven all over the place. We were even able to pick up some breast milk when we were on holiday in Dunsborough a few months ago. I've met nothing but amazing people of all shapes, sizes, walks of life, demographic, everything you can possibly imagine. Even on the very first day when we noticed that my wife wasn't producing breast milk, my wife put out a Hail Mary through Facebook. Within half an hour, we had a local mother in Wembley get straight onto the expressing pumps and walked around to our house and delivered us 100 mils of breast milk. Despite what the world is potentially suggesting to us at the moment, that people are always wanting to fight and there's nothing but horror and terrible people out there, this was an amazing reassurance that in truth, there are far more amazing people out there than we probably give credit to. So to the Facebook page and the community associated with human milk for human babies, you have nothing but my deepest gratitude and appreciation for what it is that you do. So in the current world, my third learning is particularly significant because there's a lot of conversation about changes in currency and economic resets and all these things. My learning has been that the currency that any parent speaks in is that of sleep. Now, my wife and I, we were very fortunate. We have never been particularly poor when it comes to sleep. And in brutal truth, I would suggest that even our worst of nights that we have suffered through would probably be the equivalent of many people's excellent nights. So when it comes to sleep, we have been very, very blessed. We have deliberately created a structure, a routine, an environment that supports sleep for Hamish, both during the day, which I can't emphasize enough is probably even more important than during the night. Even yesterday when I was on daddy daycare Wednesday morning as my wife was at work, Hamish had nearly 3 hours sleep yesterday morning. He then had another hour and a half yesterday afternoon, and he went down at about 6:15 without so much as a fuss last night and woke up at about 6 o'clock this morning. We had to go in and settle him a couple of times overnight, but really the resettling time took no more than 5 or 10 minutes. Sleep, I appreciate for parents, is absolutely paramount. Our ability to tolerate everything is a far higher when we've had a good night's sleep. But the sleep for the kiddos is something that I talk about with my patients every single day. And as I mentioned, that daytime sleep is probably the most important and one of the greatest barometers, greatest indicators as to how happy, healthy a child is doing. So sleep is a new currency that I have had a far greater level of appreciation of over the last 7 months. Tacked on to that conversation about sleep is the topic of sleep regressions. Now, this has been something clinically speaking that I have not really encountered in discussions and research papers through all of my learnings over the years. However, it is something that is very commonly spoken about both on the interweb, through mothers groups, through Instagrams, through Facebooks, etc. We even have nowadays pediatric sleep consultants that discuss this topic on a regular basis. And these sleep regressions tend to coincide with significant developmental milestones. So periods of times around 3 months, around 6 months, around 8 months, etc. appear to be significant regressions, as they are coined, in this world of children having interrupted sleeps when they previously may have slept very, very well. Clinically speaking, as a chiropractor who takes care of lots of babies every single day, I haven't found it to match up as clearly as perhaps is suggested through Google, Facebook, Instagram, and sleep consultants. I am still challenged by the concept itself. I generally see that when a child is not sleeping well, there is something far more going on than simply a developmental milestone. I also don't really understand why sleep would be affected by those milestones. However, I am open to learning new things, and if you have some valuable information, please share it with me. I would love to get a better understanding of this phenomenon. When it comes to children over their first 7 months, my learnings have suggested that little things become big things very, very quickly. Now, yes, Hamish is growing. He started out relatively small. He is growing. I'm very confident he's actually going to be taller than me by the time his growing is done. However, that will be in a few years' time. What I wanted to talk about was actually Hamish's neck. And particularly we had a moment around the age of 8 to 10 weeks where we both noticed significant limitations with the way Hamish was using his neck. Now you see, the human spine requires one simple thing in order to be able to function at its highest, and that is balance. It requires a balance between top and bottom. It requires a balance between left and right. It requires a balance between front and back. What we noticed with Hamish was he had a significant imbalance in the way he was turning his head. Now the significance and consequence of that, particularly as a child, is if they always prefer to turn their head to one side, we will notice several things, one of which being they will have a particular preference for which breast they may feed off, or if you're bottle feeding, which side they prefer to be fed from. What was significant for Hamish was he was always sleeping with his head turned in one direction. Do that long enough and you will create a flattening of the skull on that shape, on that side. The fancy word for that is plagiocephaly, which essentially means Latin, flat head. Now, Many people, many health professionals still to this day will suggest that plagiocephaly is primarily a cosmetic thing and it's nothing to be concerned about. The research will disagree with that. There is a link between plagiocephaly and some learning difficulties and other brain developmental issues. Most significantly, however, is the skull itself is not the problem. The skull itself is actually the effect of the problem, which is the ability of the neck to turn evenly in a balanced manner to both sides. In Hamish's situation, we noticed this at around 8 or 9 weeks. I think I've done a previous video where I even showed one of the classic tests that we do on a child at this age called the pull to sit test, which is literally pulling them from laying on their back position and watching how much their head flops. At Hamish's age, it was far too floppy, which indicates that he doesn't have control of the muscles of his neck based on the imbalance that we found. I managed to be able to identify this and I adjusted it over the course of about 4 or 5 days. I think I adjusted him 3 or 4 times. And literally over the course of the next week to 10 days, there was a complete resolution both in Hamish's ability to turn his head and even the skull shape completely corrected itself within 2 weeks. So this is something I really recommend that you don't sit on. If you notice an imbalance with your child's spine and they're not turning both ways or they're not using both arms or both legs or whatever imbalance you notice, get it checked as soon as you possibly can. So number 5 on my major learnings through the first 7 months of parenthood is very simple. Teeth suck. Why these horrible ivories cause these little guys so much pain and discomfort is beyond me. I know when I was a child growing up, they used to talk about Bonjela as a gel that you could rub on kids' gums, which gave them a lot of pain relief. Typically, it's not recommended as freely nowadays, and what you can look into is there are other forms of rums which actually appear to be based on chamomile tea. Now, personally, I'm not a tea drinker. I don't appreciate chamomile tea. My wife, however, is an avid tea drinker, and we've found that what works is we soak a little rag or a flannel in some chamomile tea. You put that in the freezer so you have the cold plus the chamomile tea. Hamish sucks and chews on that and it gives him a significant amount of relief from those brutal, horrible teeth. He's 7 months old. He has the 2 teeth on his bottom jaw. His second one only came through in the last week. I'm still watching and waiting to see when the others, particularly at the top, are going to come through. But here's hoping we can keep him as calm and as comfortable as possible as the rest of these ivories work their way through his gums. So my next big learning has a simple question to it. How is it that something so small can require so much stuff simply to leave the house? There's Hamish, then there's his blanket, his socks, a rattle or a toy, the pram, his day bag, making sure they're both stocked with nappies and another change of clothes, any bottles that we may or may not need, and I haven't even talked about the car as of yet. He's only tiny, but there's a lot of stuff that is involved in getting him out of the house. This was particularly noticeable for me when we went on our first family holiday down to Dunsborough a few months ago, and the back of the car, I have a very big car, was packed to the rafters, 2/3 with Hamish's stuff. I'm pretty sure he had more clothes packed in there than my wife and I combined, but we made it. The game of Tetris got it all into the boot and we survived. If you know of a way to pack more streamlined, please let me know in the comments below. I would love your advice on how to minimize the amount of crap that is packed just to simply leave the house. So there is a phenomenon that I have come across in this first 7 months which I have to say is nothing short of terrifying. This is my next big learning through these months, and that has been the phenomenon of the Poon Army. Now, I have been fortunate. I have not been the first-hand victim of a significant explosive Poon Army yet. My wife, however, has had it running down her leg, covering her stomach, covering the baby seat, covering the pram. I've just had the big smelly poos that have been reasonably well contained. So there have been times where I've looked at the nappy and simply asked the question is, what have you done? You've got a basic job, Mr. Nappy, and you have failed miserably because there is poo from the back of my child's skull to the sole of his feet. As he's been getting older and obviously his diet is changing, we've started to introduce some goat's milk formula. Again, his poos are constantly changing. He's slowly starting to develop a little bit of interest in solids, which will drive the poos to change again even further. But the Poon Army is something that is got me on knife's edge on a regular basis, especially when I get that lovely odor wafting through my nostrils. And I'm always asking the question, where am I going to find the poo next? So my final learning that I've had over the last 7 months of parenthood is very, very simple. Despite the poo-namis, despite the interrupted sleep, despite the immense amount of stuff I'm packing into the car simply to leave the house with the little guy, the smiles, the giggles, they all make up for any of those crappy nights that you may have. The smiles and the giggles and the hugs and the absolute 100% love that you do receive from your child is something that I had never experienced until becoming a parent. I thought my dog gave me his complete undivided love and attention, always wagging his tail when I came home, no matter whether he'd been well fed, well loved, or simply abandoned for a long day at work. But when I get home or I wake up in the morning, might have had a crap night, I go in to see Hamish and he's there smiling, happy as a pig in mud. It's something that absolutely impacts you in a profound way. I wouldn't have it any other way. The little guy has brought a lot of amazement and cheer to my life. I look forward to the coming months, even years, even when he's a teenager and he smells horrible. But I will keep you updated on any further learnings that I have. But those smiles and giggles, they solve all problems. So there it is, my major learnings from the first 7 months of parenthood. Very quickly again, I'm in simple amazement and awe of the human body, both as a professional, but now obviously as a husband, watching my wife Mel go through pregnancy, labor and childbirth. When given the opportunity, the body can do amazing things. Secondly, sleep. It's something, a currency that parents speak about, which you probably don't have a full appreciation of until you are a parent itself. Thirdly, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Our punch in the face was the challenge with regards to breast milk. It simply opened my eyes to the positives that can come from social media and my appreciation for the humans out there that are willing to donate their breast milk. My next major learning, one of my major learnings I should say, are the phenomenons of Poon Armies. Whether they be on breast milk or on formula, whether it be contained or not, they are something that will have you on edge every single time you get a simple little whiff of that smell. Another major learning I've had is the ability to be able to pack a car with more stuff than I've ever considered in the simple means of leaving the house to go and get a cup of coffee. These kids require a lot of stuff. Another learning has been a simple reminder that very, very quickly, little things can become big things. This was with regards to Hamish's neck, and we identified it nice and early. We're able to address it nice and quickly to stop it turning into something significant. So that's where I, as a call out to all parents, if you notice an imbalance with your child's movements and postures, get it checked. You're much better off having it checked and there'd be nothing to worry about than letting it slide until it becomes a big thing days, weeks, or months later. One of my final 2 major learnings has been teeth suck. They're brutal. Bonjela is no longer recommended. We have discovered chamomile tea seems to be a similar or suitable alternative. And finally, the biggest learning of them all is even as much as you think you're big and tough and gruff as a dad, in truth, your heart will simply get turned into butter when you get those smiles and those giggles even after the worst of nights. So there it is, guys, my major learnings from the first 7 months. If you've got any comments and feedback, you can help me out with any of them, or you've had any other different learnings, please hook it up in the comments below. I would love to find out and swap some war stories with you. And until I've got some more learnings, I'll talk to you next time. Bye.